Hey, I'm Matt Zemon, and happiness is feeling comfortable with who I am and where I'm going.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good definition of happiness.
Well, I
Why do you
appreciate that.
define it that way, Matt?
Oh, I think I've spent a lot of time in my life not really being comfortable with who I am and just providing, which I was good at. I could build businesses and provide, but yeah, I didn't find that I didn't find all that satisfying. And I think now I'm at a different place in life and different understanding and different awareness of the world, and I'm much happier, if we're going to use that word.
Awesome. So, how long ago did that kind of transition start to being happier and coming into more of yourself?
It for me, it started with a psychedelic experience in 2019, where some friends had invited me to try magic mushrooms or psilocybin. I had never done such a thing, and in that one 6-hour experience, I reconnected with my mom. I could understand and feel her there and pull like a string from her to me to my kids. I realized I felt incredibly safe and loved in that moment, and then realized, wait a minute, I don't feel incredibly safe and loved in my everyday life. And what's going on with that? And that led to this incredible journey of experiencing different psychedelics with different types of spiritual leaders and medical providers and a range, um, and an exploration of my consciousness and realizing that, wait a minute, I don't have to do anything to be worthy of love, and I've got plenty of love to give. And it's just, yeah, it's changed everything, Phil.
That's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. So, is that what drove you to be the curator for the book and the editor for the book?
It is. It's exactly what drove me there. I left that experience and said, I want to learn more. So I went back to school because I'm kind of geeky. And I got a master's in psychology and neuroscience because I wanted to understand the scientific literature first. And I had a bunch of questions. And what I did is I went to people who were smarter than me about different topics and asked them to contribute to this book. And then I double checked their work by going to medical professionals and asked them to review it for accuracy. And I put all of that in this book where, I mean, it starts with personal stories that I wrote, but then it moves into kind of an overview of psychedelics as a whole. What are they? How do you get access to them? What are the legal ramifications? What are the ethical ramifications? And then it goes molecule by molecule or medicine by medicine over the most common ones so that people can pick and choose what they're interested in, and do a deep dive into those.
So, the book is titled Psychedelics for Everyone. Does that mean everybody should be taking psychedelics, Matt?
It does not. No,
Oh,
it.
dang.
Yeah, no. I love the. I like the title because I do believe that psychedelics are good for society, but there are definitely people with certain who are taking different prescriptions or have specific mental or physical backgrounds that just don't make them a good candidate for psychedelics based on what we know today. But I do think that everybody should read this book because whether it's for you, for someone you love, or just maybe to be better informed for the next election, understanding how these tools work, how historically and currently can uh, can help reduce risk and lead to better outcomes.
Interesting. Interesting. Well,
Mhm.
we call this the cult of overachievement. And as an overachiever, I'm like, oh, I want something that can help me do more. Is that the goal of psychedelics, that I can, crank it up and overachieve even more, Matt? Or what's the goal?
So I think what's powerful about these medicines is that it meets people wherever they are, and that it's not up to me to tell anybody this should be your experience or this is why you should take these medicines. These medicines are provided by nature. Many of them are provided by nature, and different people go to them for different reasons. So on the cult of overachieving, yeah, I could totally see why people would say, I want to optimize the time I have here on this planet. And I want to make sure I'm living the most full life that I can possibly live. And to do that, I want to step back, use these medicines to journey within and see what there is to see. And maybe that'll change the way I look at the world. Maybe that'll change the way I interact with my employees or my boss or my spouse or my children. Maybe it'll change how I think about what happens after life. Maybe all these different things. Is that overachieving? I think it can be, but it's also just achieving.
Mm,
And I'll say one more thing, Phil. I think for me, when I've thought about overachieving historically, it's like, how can I maximize sales? How can I be the best in the industry? How can I get onto the whatever publications or our industry publications, those types of things. When I think about overachieving now, it's how do I just have a full life every day, every moment. And I love that. I love and doing that without the pressure that I felt before, that if I don't provide, if I don't produce, if I don't own, if I don't run, then I'm not worthy enough. I'm not doing enough. And all that pressure is gone. I can still produce and I can still earn and I can still provide, but the pressure point is different. The motivation is different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's interesting because I was going to follow up with, so does that mean we don't do all those things?
Mm.
And you made a really good point there. The fact is we can still do those things if we want to, but we don't have to feel the pressure or the worthiness, if you will, to actually do them. Did I understand you right?
I think you did. I think a lot of us who are entrepreneurs and are overachievers in our fields, many of us were promoted early. Something happened early in life where we took on more responsibility than a typical child would have. In my case, I had an alcoholic father. I then had divorced parents. I had, I was a lot of peacekeeping, not knowing what was going to happen next. Yeah, and that led to, I think that led, at least in my story that I tell, is I believe that led to me wanting to do extra well in school and to do these different ventures to make sure that my parents still loved me and to make sure that always had enough money to do whatever I wanted to do. But I knew it wasn't coming from somewhere else. So I think a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, who are in members of EO or YPO or Vistage, they have a background that probably resonates with. Something happened. And at our core, then it's like, if we don't, at least again, I'll speak for me. As I grew different businesses, I kept changing the goalposts. I was like, oh, I'll be happy when I have a building with my company's name on it. Okay, I'll be happy when I have 500 employees. I'll be happy when I have $1 million in the bank. I'll be happy. And it never was enough, Phil. Every time I'd hit one goal, it'd be great for a day or two. And then I'd move, and then I'd add a new goal. And then I'd add a new goal. So I think getting and exploring, well, where did all this come from? And what do I really want? Well, I really want to spend more time with my kids. I really want to be able to be present at home, and I don't want to travel 3 nights a week. I really want to know that this isn't that I have a longer existence than just the time I have here on this earth. Those types of things. Yeah. So yes, you have to provide resources. We have to have shelter and food and things, of course. But we as a whole are so far beyond making a living. We are definitely into the amassing of wealth, the amassing of things, and at least in my experience for me, the things weren't providing happiness.
Yeah. Well, I like that. I'll buy in the fact that we don't have to change the fact we set goals. We have to change the reason why we set them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have to think about, okay, so why am I doing this? Is this really providing happiness? Is this really a happiness practice, or is this just amassing wealth? And I think that's just that pause. If we stop for a minute and we think about that, why am I doing this? What is this for? Who told me this is right? Is this my goal, or is this Matt's goal for me? Right? Has someone else set this? I think is very instructive and can help us with the cult of overachievement. Am I tracking with you here, Matt? Am I on the same page?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we do so many things because our parents wanted us to do them, or our spouse wants us to do them, or we don't even know why. We just do them. We just all of a sudden becomes 10 and 12-hour days are the norm. And we hide behind I hide behind my computer. I hide behind my task list. I am super focused on achieving. And for what? Versus I'm super focused on connecting, and I can provide for my family, and I can be present. It's all possible. But we can just switch those motivations. And then when the motivation is gone, the anxiety can decrease, the depression can decrease, the use of other behaviors to numb the symptoms that come with. Again, I'm going to speak for me. When I was working all the time, my life was pretty structured. I'd wake up, I'd I'd have go to the office, I'd do my work, I'd come home, we'd have dinner, watch a show or two, I'd go to bed. There wasn't a lot of time for friends. There wasn't a lot of time for human connection, and I was lonely. Um, I'm not lonely anymore. Because I'm not lonely anymore, I don't drink anymore. Um, and I think we each can pick the behaviors to numb symptoms. It could be exercise, it could be gambling, it could be drinking, it could be eating, it could be all these different behaviors that we do. That the core root is this: something's missing. And I believe with psychedelic medicines, we can kind of explore what is it that for me that's missing, and then or have that awareness and then move forward differently. So it
So what
doesn't
is
change who we are; it changes what we do.
so what does the psychedelic do? Is it like block the receptor,
Mhm.
or tell me a little bit about the science behind that so I can understand?
Yeah, it's going to do a few things. I mean, the first thing it's going to do, and I'm going to talk super high level, and I'm going to talk generically. So there's certainly different flavors of this, but at a high level, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to quiet down your default mode network. So that's that inner narrator that's constantly saying, "Phil, you've got to achieve more. You got to do more." It's going to quiet that down. You're not good enough. Quiet all that down. So for many of us, when that happens, it's like the weight of the world was lifted off of our shoulders. It's like, oh, well, that feels good. What's going on? We also then, for again, many of us, that's the first realization that I am not my thoughts. I have thoughts, I can observe thoughts, but I don't generate those thoughts. Those thoughts happen. So all that happens when that default mode network is quieted down. Then what ends up happening is our neurons start to connect in ways that they don't normally connect, that they used to connect when we were young, but as we've gotten older, we've pared them down, pared them down, pared them down, to now we literally, when we talk about people getting stuck in their way, yeah, that's because our neurons are firing in a certain way. Well, with the psychedelic, our brain's gonna light up, and these are gonna connect in all sorts of new and wonderful ways, and that's going to remind us that we don't need to think like we have been thinking. That might mean how we think about ourselves, our relationships, our careers, our all of it. It changes. So now you have that again moment of these things connecting in different ways. We then get into a place of neuroplasticity. So our brain actually goes back to almost a childlike state where it's able to learn faster and learn at a pace that's, again, it's just different and stronger. And that extends for about 30 days after the psychedelic experience. So for those of us who are working with coaches or therapists or people who are helping us as we try to shape our behaviors, we're in a really great place to do that following a psychedelic, because um, we can retrain our mind. We can retrain it to focus on the positive. We can retrain it to shift the things that we're doing that aren't serving us. And we have a period of time where we can let those patterns really sink in. And then the final thing that happens with psychedelics for many people, not all, is that they have some type of spiritual awakening. For I don't even know what other term to use, but they understand that they're not just part of um, this fleeting time we have, this blink of an eye that we have on Earth. That we are spiritual creatures having a human experience. And for those people who are dealing with whether it's aging parents, whether they are the parent who is aging and getting into a different experience, whether they're just trying to explore consciousness for how do you talk to your children. And so many of us, including me, have moved away from our faith traditions of our grandparents, and we're kind of left on our own. Well, psychedelics allows you to explore and have a direct spiritual experience. So all those things happen.
Wow. Wow. So let's talk a little more about that end of life, Matt. We talked about this in the prep call here, but end of life, what's the importance of having some end of life practices, and how can psychedelics kind of aid those, make those more intentional?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the research with end of life, and Johns Hopkins is doing great research. Yale, UCSF is working with populations who've been giving a terminal diagnosis. So as you would imagine, you've been told you're going to die sometime soon. It's fair to assume that you would have some type of depression or anxiety, be experiencing those emotions. When given psilocybin is the medicine mostly being studied, they're seeing rapid decreases in depression and anxiety in that population. So does it change? It doesn't change the fact that they're going to die. what it does is it changes the quality of life that they're going to experience during this next chapter, for all those reasons we just discussed. And because of that, the FDA has given psilocybin breakthrough therapy designation. We are seeing more and more studies being done. Utah just talked about using or just legalized psilocybin in two of their major hospital systems. I mean, it's an incredible medicine for that phase of life. In the ceremonial space, I see psilocybin being used not just for the person in the active state of transitioning, but for their families. So help us heal what needs to be healed. Help us express what needs to be expressed while we still can. Help us ask the questions that need to be asked while we still can. And help us do that in a loving and aware manner. So I love psychedelics for people actively transitioning and for the friends and family that are bearing witness to this very human experience of death. And I think it changes so much about about that process.
So do we just go down to the grocery store and just pick some up? I mean,
Yes, well,
how does this work, Matt?
it's a challenge here in our country. We have some states that are decriminalizing and psychedelics and legalizing psychedelics in a medical model. We have some cities that are doing decriminalization work. And then we have lots of different avenues. But essentially, there are three ways that people access psychedelics in America. Some people do this medical model that we just talked about. They apply for clinical trials, or they live in a state where they can get into a medical system and they want to have a diagnosis and they want to go through that process with somebody with a lab coat. And that's beautiful. Others say are more of a decriminalization model. So we have decrim nature chapters all over the country. Their premise or their thesis is that no adult should tell another adult that they can't put nature in their body. And that's a very libertarian ideal. But also part of what they are saying is the medical model is expensive. And it's not fair to only give access to people who can afford it when you can grow mushrooms for not very much money, as just using that as an example. So I think the decriminalization movement is important, and it's an and. And then the third way is there are somewhere between 200 and 2,000, we don't know the number, of psychedelic churches in America, and a whole range of providers. And they offer, some are ayahuasca and some are psilocybin and some are multi-sacrament using MDA and psilocybin and bufo, whatever. They're using multiple sacraments. And some people say, I don't want a diagnosis, and I want to do this as part of my spiritual practice. And in a country founded on religious freedom, using a medicine that has been scientifically proven to be relatively risk reduced, I should be allowed to do this responsibly and in a ceremonial setting, as we have for thousands of years. And some people are choosing that, and they find those churches by going to typing in, like, that was psychedelic society near me, and talking to people who know, because most of these churches don't advertise because we can't. So people have to ask the questions: where can I find a church? Where do you have a service I can come to? And not be afraid to ask that question.
Wow. So you mentioned we there. You have one of these churches, Matt. Talk about that.
I do. I work with a church. I work on kind of all sides of this. So yes, I work with a church that is based out of North Carolina, and we hold services in lots of different locations. We had one in January in Mexico, as an example. I work with other churches and how they create structure and create the container. So let me talk about that for just a second. There are multiple parts of organizing a psychedelic church. One part is the container. So that's all the stuff from like health intakes to the administrative things. How do you set the stage? And then we bring in experienced medicine providers, people who are really experienced delivering the medicine, and they come in to do what they do best. And then we bring in other people to do the integration work, and that's to have those calls and in-person meetings after the ceremony to unpack what's come in. So I work with our church and other churches on how you set those things up. And then I also work with medical providers on how they can incorporate ceremonial best practices into their protocols. and in my opinion, not only increase their profitability, but increase their effectiveness by using these tools that we in the ceremonial space know really well.
So you mentioned cost and profit and all these things. Is it expensive? Is this like, can you give us a range of what we're looking at here, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, so each model has different pricing. So I'll use the medical model first. If you were to go to a ketamine clinic, legal in all 50 states, for IV or intramuscular ketamine, it's somewhere between $500 and $1,000 a dose for a in-clinic experience. If you were to go to a ketamine telehealth provider, maybe it's $200 a dose for your experience. But you have more things that you need to do. On the decriminalization model, well, they're talking about people growing their own mushrooms, so buying spores and getting grow kits and figuring out themselves. Then that's very inexpensive. And then on the ceremonial model, sorry, I'll go back to medical for a second. In retreats in like Oregon, where they're legal, roughly $3,000 ish for a psilocybin retreat. They can be higher, and I've seen some at $1,500, $2,000, so they can be lower too. And then the ceremonial side, I see a range. There are some churches that they're growing their own sacraments and they're inviting people into their houses, and it's very low to the ground and it's a few $100. And there's retreats like what we do, where we bring in musicians and chefs and lodging and things, and it's a couple $1,000s. And then there's retreats that you can do in Jamaica or the Netherlands or Costa Rica, and those are $3,000 to $6,000. So they range, but that's about what they cost.
It sounds about what I'd expect to pay for good medical coverage, right? I mean, it's not cheap, but it's not nothing either. And yeah, if I knew how to grind up my own stuff, I might find that it's, a few bucks, but probably I'm not going to be able to do that, or I might not have the time to do that. So I would want to be with someone who is an expert, so that could help me unpack that, could help me explain that. Is that kind of what happens?
Yeah, there's different philosophies, and actually, that's a really good question, Phil. That people that encourage your audience to kind of think about these questions, regardless of which path they choose. The questions are really the same. So if you go to your medical provider, you would say to them, "What do you do to prepare me for this experience?" And maybe they do a lot, and maybe they do none. But either way, then you know if you need to supplement that. Who's going to be in the room with me? Is this a one-on-one experience? Is this a group experience? Again, there's no right or wrong, but you'll know. Do you give me music? What's the environment like? What does it feel like? Are you talking to me? Do you expect me to talk to you? What's your philosophy of operation? All those are good questions. And then following the medical experience, asking, what do you do afterwards? Are there integration coaching or therapy or groups? Again, if whether they do or don't isn't right or wrong, it just lets you know where you need to supplement for yourself. Ceremonial, it's basically the same questions, because there are different philosophies in how you run a psychedelic ceremony. And the ones that I subscribe to is that this is very inner work. So I like it when the ceremony providers have music and they're creating a custom soundscape based on the energy of the room. For me, I prefer somewhere between 10 and 20 participants. I like a group. I like it. I like the group energy. I think there's a lot that comes from the sharing of a group and the energetic process of a group. I like it when the providers don't talk to me during the ceremony. They let me do my own inner work, but I also like knowing that they're there so that if I find myself scared or in a loop or need help for any reason, I can raise my hand and know that someone's going to attend to me. That's my personal practice. Everybody is different, has their own priorities. But if I'm recommending, yeah, I think that's a lovely way to start. But there are ayahuasca. There's an ayahuasca retreat center in Costa Rica that's relatively famous. So they do 100 people at a time. That's what they do. There's a very famous entrepreneurs group that does kind of higher end ayahuasca ceremonies, and they do 40 people at a time. And then there's very nice bespoke practitioners who work with 1 or 2 people at a time. So it's very personal, that question.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting. So, well, with football season here, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Aaron Rodgers, right? Like
Sure.
year and a half ago, he said he went on an ayahuasca retreat. I don't know how much you know or don't know about that, but can you share a little bit about like what you understand about what he did and how that might have helped him play better football or not play better football?
Well, I think he says it helped him. He talks about life before the ayahuasca retreat, and then he talks about his performance after, and that he feels it's changed, though, again, the way he looks and interacts with the world. We see athletes drawn to psychedelics for a number of different reasons, like in the hockey side and the mixed martial arts side. We see people with traumatic brain injury. We see people who have actually, we see a lot of retired professional athletes coming to psychedelics because now they not only have the injuries, but they also have a loss of identity. And what
Mm,
are they going to do for the rest of their lives after what they've trained so hard is taken away? And then we see people like Aaron Rodgers who are coming in their career saying, I want to understand the world differently. I believe if I understand myself differently, I will be a better father, husband, partner, athlete, business person, on and on and on. And I believe that's what happened with him, that he had these really profound experiences and it's changed the way he interacts with the world, and he still overachieves in the way that he knows how to do and what he's trained his whole life for. But I think it's shifted his motivation.
cool. That's
Hmm.
cool. So, do you have any checklists or anything people can get? I mean, I know we want to recommend folks, if you want to do your own research, pick up a copy of Matt's book, Psychedelics for Everyone. Matt Zemon down here, Zemon.
That's
But
it.
any checklists or any other guides that you can offer folks if they want to just get started, maybe dip their toe in?
Yeah, so if they want to start with like microdosing, they're thinking about just taking a little bit, a tenth to a 20th of a dose and doing that for a program. I have a free guide to microdosing on my website, and they can just go to mattzemon.com and they can download that. If they are already finding their way either medically or ceremonially to a larger psychedelic experience, I do have another book called Beyond the Trip. And Beyond the Trip is a preparation and integration workbook. So it helps you in advance in setting your intentions, and then it gives you work for 4 weeks following your experience, things to unpack. It gives you a 30-day gratitude journal, so you can change your mind again for the happiness, raise the positivity, and you can use that no matter which medicine you're using, no matter how you're using it. This journal works. I'm super excited to be working right now on actually a version of this journal specifically for veterans. I'm working with a group called Heroic Hearts Project on a
Oh,
collaboration, and it actually won't be just the workbook. There'll be a whole guide for coaches and therapists that go with it, so that the veterans can work with their preferred therapist or coaches and work through a whole program. And I'm super excited. That should be out in about 3 months. So we're looking about June of this year.
wow. Outstanding. Well, all this is available at Matt's website. That's Matt Zemon, MATTZEMON.com. His book that he mentioned there with the gratitude journal, Beyond the Trip. And the book that I got a copy of, Psychedelics for Everyone. Matt compiled and edited this. So good stuff. Matt, any last words for folks as they're thinking about this or as they're considering getting started?
Yeah, I think what I'd say is if you're still listening to this podcast or the stream and now you're 30 minutes in, it my instinct is you're looking for permission. You're looking for someone else to say that you're not alone in whatever reasons you're here, and that this is a path for you. And I'm in my 50s, very professional, successful in all normal measurements. And in a million years, I never thought I'd be talking about psychedelics with Phil here today. And I can't imagine my life having not had this opportunity to do this. So it's out there. You're not alone. There's a lot of us who are using these tools, and I wish you best of luck. And feel free, if you want to talk to me, come to my site and book a call, and I'm happy to talk with you about your particular journey and see how I can help. Help you weigh the pros and cons of whatever you're considering.
Awesome. That's super generous, Matt. Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing a lot more about psychedelics so I can understand more myself. I appreciate it.